mina olen Kais ja Telegruppi IT-osakonna meeskonnajuht. Kuna meil kõigil on aega vähe, me keegi ei taha asju teha liiga palju ja ise ja parem sõidaksin selle kaardiga, siis tänase Timo jututeema on see, et mismoodi me saame asju automatiseerida, et asjad teeksid ise ja kõik oleks hea. So Timo, tell us how we can automate and get more karting. not spending our time in the configuration things.
Actually, other Timo will begin and tell a couple of slides or a couple of things about the karting before I start doing the more technical things or technical presentation.
Yeah. Okay, so my name is Timo Long, I'm not Leppinen, so it's just Timo's presentation, but basically some words what Extreme has happened over a couple of years and how we have developed. Hopefully you have seen these slides already or at least heard the story, so from that perspective we can go relatively fast. But let's start. So I suppose everybody knows about what is Extreme Networks as a company. Good. And everybody have a driver license, so we can make a race after the presentations. Karine as well. No. You have to drive.
You're still driving?
Yes. So let's see how it goes on the afternoon. But basically, Extreme, we are just doing networks and we are trying to focus to be good in that segment. Founded in 1996 and so on. And basically here you can see the different, let's say, solution areas what we have. Extreme routing. Before the merge with the Brocade, we didn't have a real routing capabilities at all in our portfolio. Okay, those are layer 3 switches, but those has been mainly switches, not acting as a router. So now we can say that we really have good BGP capable, MPLS layer 3 capable routers. Then basically the regular bread and butter, the switching part, what we have done many years. Then the Extreme Management Center is basically kind of an umbrella or glue what is combining everything together. So there's basically all the management, visibility about the devices, visibility about the applications, and so on. Then our Extreme Wireless is of course the wireless portfolio, and then the Extreme Cloud is basically cloud managed switches and access points. Both of the switches and access points can be managed locally using Extreme Management Center or just CLI. All those can be managed from the cloud as well. And it is relatively nice way to do very segmented kind of networks. We are thinking about that we are getting approximately 1.2 billion revenue and so on, blah, blah, blah. I think most important thing is just that we are growing and the company is healthy. So from that perspective, we can expect that we will be here in the future as well. So if we are looking the new Extreme, and there's a lot of logos on the wall. And if we are starting from the merge with the Enterasus, as you remember, hopefully, it was about 4 years ago. And Enterasus had legacy or roots from the cable joint, and then they had Siemens Wi-Fi, and I think that was roots from Chantry. And then on those days, both companies was relatively equal size. Both made approximately $350 million revenue. And then about 2 years ago, we bought Zebra wireless LAN business. And there is basically legacy history, Motorola and invented by Symbol. Then the air defense is purely overlay wireless IDS, IPS solution. So when you need very good security, you can just use overlay air defense installation and see what is happening on the radio frequencies or how the airwave is doing. Then about 1 year ago, we now basically introduce or say that we are going to buy Amaya switching part as well. And it has finalized during the last summer. And on the Amaya, there's basically history of Nortel, and there's history of Bay networks and so on. And then last but hopefully not least was Brocade SRA business. So not the storage, but the IP, Ethernet IP from the Brocade, and it's basically heritage from Foundry, and then they were using Stackstorm as an automation tool. I think Timo will hopefully say something about the Stackstorm as well. Mainly today's presentation is focusing to somewhere here, because Nortel was very heavily pushing shortest path bridging and that technology out. And that is in a key role with our automated campus story on today. Any questions about these? So there's a lot of history and hopefully a lot of future as well, a lot of patents and a lot of innovations. So from that perspective. Any questions? No? Yes?
Comments?
Yes, you can comment them as well.
I don't have any comments, but I was just referring if somebody has something to say as well.
Okay. So here we can see that at the moment we are on the third position on the enterprise end-to-end networking. And you can see as well that how we have grown with the Interasus, Zebra, and then Brocade and Amaya. And if we think about as well these mergers or acquisitions, and Zebra, the wireless LAN business, it was just very tiny part of the whole Zebra portfolio and how they are making their revenue. And to us, the network are key thing. Like as well with the Amaya, they are focusing more the voice and UCC, and not the networking wasn't their core business. So from that perspective, again, it's good for existing Zebra, Amaya, and Brocade customers. It's the same story. And here you can, this is not the best, but you can at least see these points. And it's been how over the years we have developed our position in a Gartner Magic Quadrant. And if we are looking, these two dots are Cisco and HP. It's 2 years ago. And basically on the last, these guys are here, so we are more closer than ever with those guys. And here you can see other vendors as well from the last Gartner report. One thing is as well, it's about services and support. Of course, hopefully we never go to the situation where somebody needs some support or services or RMA and so on, but basically all the GTAC is in-house people, and there's a lot of knowledge as well on that from that perspective. So they really know what to do and how to help when there's a situation that help is needed. So it's just about this. I think it more or less, it was just very short introduction, and hopefully nobody is already sleeping or anything. So let's.
Yes, I will continue on the let's say main topic for today. And before we dive into, let's say, technical bits and pieces, I will talk about a little bit of the background, why we are doing and why you should be doing secure automated catalog solutions in your network as well. So a couple of key things is how do we win against the time? So everybody is busy. Everybody has quite a lot of amount of work to do today, and I don't know. Of course, it depends much on the organizations that you are actually working with, but normally it's the teams are not growing in that sense. So everybody needs to be doing much more work compared to, let's say, 5 or 6 years or 10 years ago, when the teams were bigger and so on. So you have to do many things, and you don't have that much time. So everything is more or less chaos. And the key thing here is to create, let's say, good processes. How do you do the things? How do you maintain the network? And of course, even a bigger part of things is the automation. So no, let's say, old school CLI pounding anymore. So everybody is just configuring services by hand, and there might be some user errors because of configuration or misconfigurations. So formal ways of doing things. So how do you deploy the new switches into the network? What are the basic configuration steps that you are doing? Are your best practices good for security-wise? Are you using SNMP version 3, or are there still, let's say, public and private SNMP version 2 communities up and running, and you can query the switches and maybe leave some data? I don't know. But anyway, so the point here is that the automation part is the key to everything. So automating your core network, automating your edge networks, getting visibility on what is actually connected in the network, and so on. So how do you win against time is by doing processes and doing automation. So how do we build pros, let's say, in networking space, I would say? You can have star kind of topology in your network. You don't have to worry about loops or something like that, basically, on those kinds of things. You can do different ways and different types of topologies, and how do you do this? This might be a little bit harder to build. But anyway, so the point here is that in our automated campus solution, it really doesn't matter what kind of topology you actually deploy. Is it a star? Is it a full mesh? Is it a partial mesh? Or is it a ring? Or whatever topology you might need is supported, and it's automatically loop free. So there is no, you don't have to think about spanning tree or heaps or Earth or whatever loop prevention protocols in that sense. So it's automatically handled by the underlying routing protocol. So you can basically create something like this as well. But anyway, so what is your opinion about today's RFPs, basically. Or when you are putting out a tender that you want to buy some new devices, is it still, how much do you think about throughput, how much do you think about resiliency, or how much do you think about MAC table sizes or routing table sizes or things like that? Because in my opinion, what is more important is the business and why you are actually building this new network. What are the key features and what are the key requirements for the business? Because you are not doing the network for networking engineers, you are providing the network for the customers and your corporate users who are actually using this particular network. So basically, what you need is really high available network, so it needs to be running 24/7. You have to be able to provision new services much more quicker than let's say a couple of years ago perhaps. In data center parts, you have to be able to move quickly your VMs from data center to data center, even in a disaster recovery situations, or just let's say optimizing your data center in a way. And of course, you have to reduce the number of possible human errors when you are configuring the whole network. One more thing about the automated campus. So Network World has a article written about this, so please go and check it. So tinyurl.com/automatedcampus. If you can remember that or take a picture, go and check it out. Stop working, no? So why extreme automated campus? What are the key features? Before this, how many of you have been reading anything about Cisco DNA, for example? Or application-centric infrastructure? Nobody? Don't be shy. We know that there is competition in our landscape, and Cisco has quite nice story, and they have quite nice things as well. But why I'm asking is because if even, okay, somebody, Martin and Mark of course knows about those things as well, but if you are in any way of digging in deeper into fabric technologies and looking at the competitive landscape, the automated campus story, Cisco DNA, for example, they are quite similar actually. We are deploying or trying to deploy the network automation, ease of use, visibility, and so on. And that is the main key on both of those technologies, basically. But we are, I would say, more open. So our APIs and the ways that we are actually doing things is not blocking you entirely to the Cisco infrastructure. So that's a huge benefit to take us into consideration as well. So why does the automated campus actually matter is we really do solve the customer challenges with this solution. So a couple of questions. So how we can increase agility and responsiveness to your business. So basically you can create the new services much more faster than with regular Ethernet-based networks. How do you minimize or at least somehow prevent the impacts of the cyber attacks? So we can do stealth networks, we can do just, let's say, point-to-point services, multi-point services as well, and you are not be able, with basically anything, you cannot see the topology. There is no hop-by-hop routing in that sense, so there's no way that you can actually see how your infrastructure is looking. and how we can consistently deliver the positive quality of the experience for the users. Somebody, I would say, has been listening our extreme analytics presentation, and we are always talking about the quality of experience. So that is the key for happy customers, happy users in the network. If everything is slow or something is not working, then the customers obviously are not that happy. So we need and we want to provide the best in class network services to your customers and of course to our customers as well. So unrivaled simplicity is the key in the whole campus solution. So basically combining some hardware and software into integrated solutions. So Fabric Connect and Fabric Attach. Basically, those are the key components in the core and basically in the access layer as well. So the Fabric Connect is the Fabric technology itself. We are talking about, that's more or less a marketing term, or we have named that Fabric technology as that. So basically, the underlying stuff is SBBM, shortest path bridging, MAC encapsulation. The Fabric Attach is a way of automating and discovering devices in the edge part of things. So it can be an access point, it can be an access video surveillance camera, it can be our IXO switches, and everything is basically automatically provisioned. So you don't have to go into the core network and create those services in there. I will show you the demo later on if you don't believe me. Okay, the key point as well in here, the management center. So one single pane of glass management system for the whole infrastructure, getting the information out of edge devices, connected devices, utilizing the authentication. Role-based access control is of course important aspect in here as well. Question actually, we also have some giveaways if somebody asks something or has some comments. So what is your personal view on doing filtering or access control lists on the access port or access point in general? Or do you think that it should be done in centralized firewalls or microsegmentation firewalls? Is that the way that you are doing things, or how do you think?
Closer to the client.
That's good. And why is that basically? So more control, yes. But in my opinion, for example, if you have legacy way of doing things, so in my opinion, legacy way is doing centralized filtering. You can see, of course, some applications on your segmentation firewall, for example. But if you think and how you secure your network infrastructure, what are you actually doing in the access layer in that sense? So why should a regular user have ability to use or create services in his laptop, basically? Why don't you filter, let's say, ports 80, 443, and so on? Why there should be any, let's say, ports open towards the client devices on the edge? Are you doing something to remedy rogue DHCP servers on the edge? If somebody plugs in a home router and it starts acting as a DHCP server towards the network, are you doing something in your switches to prevent creating a disaster from that? So basically, administrative protocols, Telnet, SSH, services like DNS, DHCP, web services, they should be filtered out at the edge or at the access port. And that by itself will help you to mitigate some of the possible impacts of just users doing something stupid and plugging in devices that they don't think that actually works. One other actually example was that, I don't say any organization names, but it was, let's say, in my opinion, a little bit sensitive environment, so you shouldn't have rogue access points, you shouldn't have any open ports, everything should be at least authenticated or disabled by default, so if somebody plugs in something, it doesn't work. But there was these guys who wanted to do for themselves a little bit nicer working environment, so to say. So they got a just regular, I don't know, D-Link or TP-Link or whatever wireless router, and they connected that to the network and created an open SSID because they were stupid enough to not secure it. And they basically opened single SSID, which opened the whole internal network to the world. And they were just sitting on the balcony and doing their work with open, without any security. So, in that sense, so you have to be able to understand the connected devices in the network, and of course, try to filter out any unwanted traffic or unwanted application as close as possible to the actual client. So yeah, so management, so visibility control, and the whole infrastructure management. Of course, services and support. And basically what I would add here is the Extreme Connect. So basically that is a part of our Extreme Management Center, and the Extreme Connect is our third-party integration API. So basically what we can do with the API is integrate with next generation firewalls like Palo Alto, Checkpoint, Fortinet. And if you are running the control, policy and control, we could even automate things like if the firewall is seeing some unwanted traffic from your end devices, it can automatically signal back from the firewall to our network access control engine saying that, okay, please quarantine this specific device, and it will not be able to move the traffic into the internet or internal services as well. So basically, what I would do is add it into the quarantine VLAN, which is basically doing redirect into a remediation portal or saying to the customer that, okay, you have been now quarantined because of this and this. So the customer knows that, okay, internet is not broken, my machine is compromised or has some malware or virus in it. So that is, in my opinion, that's one big thing in the management as well. Of course, it's not only for next generation firewalls. It can be integrated with your VMware, Hyper-V, data center environments. So if you have our summits in your data center, you can automatically deploy the new virtual LANs. So if, for example, you go and create a new virtual switch in your VMware infrastructure, and then you create VLANs into that virtual switch, they will be automatically provisioned into your hardware switches. So once again, automation parts in regular office or campus LANs and data center and integration with third-party devices. So the value for customers is do more, faster, simpler, and safer. So zero-touch, automated networking, edge, core, and aggregation. Basically, on the upcoming slides, I will show you some examples. If you deploy this whole solution in a, let's say, more regular way, how would you configure services in the core from the CLI? So just a couple of examples, but of course, in my opinion, you should be utilizing the zero-touch provisioning plus on the edge. On the core, we can just basically build new systems in a specific way that it will automatically configure the fabric and it will automatically configure everything needed, so you don't have to go and basically configure anything if you don't want to, but of course there might be something that you want to change. Automated access policy and hyper-segmentation. So basically you can create microsegments or hyper-segments in a way. So it scales up to 16 million services. So it's not entirely, let's say, limited to the VLAN space. You can, all the services are basically, how do I say it? The way that you should think is not, the services are not VLAN based, so the VLAN ID doesn't actually make any difference in a way. So at the other end of the network you can utilize VLAN number 10, and on the other end you can utilize VLAN number 20, and that is still a single layer 2 domain in a way. Intelligence, so you can get the full view of the network, application, devices and users, of course, utilizing the management, control and analytics part. So, standards-based, 802.1aq, so SPB, shortest path bridging. Self-learning, self-healing in a way, so you can create, I would say, network-to-network interfaces, which are basically the fabric interfaces of the switch. So you can configure those any way you want, and you can, as mentioned, you can connect the devices together in any way you want. Multipath, fast failover. So I would say I haven't we haven't done any extensive testing, but hopefully everybody of you guys know about EAPS and the sub 50 milliseconds failover times on EAPS. So we are pretty close with this one if you compare to EAPS, so it's really fast. And once again, the topology independent. The simplicity, why it's so simple, is basically we are running just one protocol in the whole network. So, I should have it here. This is a little bit wrongly ordered. But anyway, so if you think about the traditional traditional networks, you have your VLANs, you have your spanning tree, you could have some routing protocol like OSPF or BGP. If you run multicast, you probably might have PIM up and running. You might run connection fault management, CFM, for example, to check some link states. And if you want to run MPLS on top of everything, you create those services. So in our solution, there is basically the shortest path bridging. Of course, it's not as black and white as this one. This is showing here because basically we are running IS/IH routing protocol there, and on top of that we are running those services. But still, it's a single confined service. Yes, let's go back to here. So basically, what is the problem with today's layer 2 networks is probably understand this left-hand side problem in a way. So if you are running new services or creating new services into the network, if it's whatever the device is connecting, you have to configure each device hop by hop, or you can utilize some orchestration tools, of course, to create those services. But still, you need to know about the topology, about the ports where you are actually provisioning this, and maybe you need to do some resiliency if it's ring topology, so you might have your spanning tree up and running, or you might have your heaps or whatever. So in the fabric, the core network basically is seen as single big logical lump of devices. So you don't have to go and configure hop by hop anymore. So just configure the edges. They can be directly attached to the core, so you can create those services in the core. Or of course, if you are running our, let's say, Summit series on the edge, we can utilize the fabric attach, which will automatically tell the core network that, okay, we are creating now VLAN 124, and we are binding it to a service identifier, this and this. And it will automatically create the VLAN on the edge, and it will automatically provision your core network, so you don't have to touch it at all. So, edge-only configuration, one logical tier, and this will give you the time to do something more meaningful than configure hop by hop from the CLI things into your network. So, can we actually say that this kind of implementation gives you much more possibilities? I mean, this scenario here gives you much more possibilities to go wrong. You are configuring 20 switches, and there might be some typos going on. I don't know, compared to configuring just 4 points, for example, or single points if you're running the network access control and doing the full automation. Yes, no. Okay, let's continue. So, about the fabric itself, how it's actually created, or how it's actually configured. Okay, it's a little bit poor, the text, but basically there is a single command: boot config flag factory defaults fabric, and reboot the switch. That will configure everything needed for the fabric itself. Basically, if you want to create it by hand, there is basically, you will create 2 different VLANs. We call them backbone VLANs, or BVLANs. And you don't have to add those into the ports. You create your ISIS area and enable ISIS on the ports. Basically, it's still 5-6 commands that you need to type, but if you are lazy, just use the one, and it will automatically, there is no way that you can read those, but basically it will create the fabric, and it will enable the fabric ports based on different platforms and how the ports are configured on the platform. So it's actually, this is showing the virtual services platform, 4000 series, 7000, 8000 series, and so on. So what ports are enabled as a fabric port when you boot it like this?
Timo, just one comment.
Yes.
The presentation is out, so we can access it later on and see all.
Yeah. So, yes. As mentioned, the control planes, ISIS, we are calculating the shortest paths, and we are doing, of course, really fast failover between the links if something happens. Forwarding planes, macking Mac. And, of course, standards-based OAM can be deployed as well. Okay, about the provisioning itself. Of course, you should use our Unified Management Center. But if you want to deploy it by hand, you can create a VLAN, tie the VLAN into ISID, which is the service identifier, and then add the VLANs to your switch ports. So basically, if you configure this As you can see that we are running VLAN 40, VLAN 20 on the other end. It doesn't matter. So this will become a virtual service network with the service identifier number 100. So easy as that. You don't need to configure this and this and this and this and everything. So the topology itself, it's because of the ISL200 protocol in the underlay, is taking care of which ports it should actually use and how the traffic is forwarded. And in my opinion, this actually gives you quite nice flexibility as well. Of course, you need to be careful that when you are utilizing different VLAN numbers. But in certain environments, it's actually might be impossible to use certain VLAN IDs in let's say in this switch, because it's used on some other purposes and creating issues with the rest of the services if you cannot basically utilize that. So we can use, if we want to add, let's say, switch here into this layer 2 network, we could utilize VLAN 1244 and assign it to the same IC, and it will become part of the same layer 2 network.
Your question about those layer 2 services, so basically in this scenario we have those VLAN 20 and 40 and we are just making layer 2 line.
Yes.
We have a loop in left hand side and there's a broadcast storm. Does it go through the whole network and as well affecting to this VLAN 40?
Basically, yes, because it's still, this whole lump is layer 2 broadcast domain. Yeah. But of course, you have, when you are utilizing the zero-touch provisioning and best practices on the edge, you are doing ERP, for example, so it will prevent the loops on the edge. And better than that, you should be utilizing the authentication as well. So in that sense, if you're doing things by the book and by the best practices, you should never basically create a loop. Of course, it could be possible to do something that will cause, of course, service interruptions, but it's the same thing with all of the vendors and all of the technologies. So, but anyway, so point of this is that if you are doing the services by hand, it's still quite easy, should be quite fast, and of course the possibility of doing errors because you don't have to configure this and this and this and everything between is much better in that sense. What about L3 services? We are talking about it, actually what I didn't mention before in here. So this is layer 2 stuff. We are not talking about ISIS is basically layer 2 protocol. So we are not talking IP in a way the underlying.
So it's prone to max spoofing?
It could be, but of course we have the security mechanisms in here, so you can actually do authentication between the nodes and so on. So in that sense, the core itself is not, you probably cannot do. Of course, you need to have the passwords and authentications enabled and so on if you want to basically spoof something and get information about the network in the edge.
Not only run Mexico or just encrypt the traffic as well.
Yeah. Yeah, this is basically layer 2, so just something that I failed to mention before. But anyway, so we can
What's the overhead?
I need to check it out, but it's not huge. Of course, we are doing because of the mathematical calculation.
If you use that one and properly configured network by hand, what's the percentage?
To be honest, I don't know.
You said it's faster, but there's overhead, so it should be slower actually.
I mean, of course, if okay, where did I have that one? Faster to deploy, faster resiliency because of if you compare it to let's say layer 3 or MPLS networks, because the ideology is basically the same with MPLS or L2 VPNs or maybe even L3 services as well. So you only configure the edges. So basically, you are relying more on the OSPF or CFM for connection file management and so on. So I would say that it's faster to deploy and faster resiliency, but I cannot say if it's slower or faster than, let's say, basic L2 networks. I would say that there's just really minimum hit in that because the overhead is not really that big. But we can check on the break, for example. I can check the header and what is basically the overhead compared to standard.
That's overhead is one point because you're doing optimization on the network level, something. So in a sense, you're taking over the control mechanisms of other protocols that you're actually payloading there. So maybe that's the efficiency part there. So you have to compare actual networks.
Yeah.
Because overhead is one point only.
Yeah, that's true. Okay. L3 services, this is a bit overly simplified, so basically you need to configure, of course, this, but I didn't have enough room here to put all the commands show up. So basically the idea is there, so you can create your VRFs and IP addresses and then configure the VRF itself. So it's IPVPN, ISID, and enable the IPVPN. Really, once again, quite simple, and you can of course create multiple networks in single VRF as well. But both layer 2, layer 3 services can be deployed on top of the layer 2 underlay. When was our break? It was in the...
But I checked to have a listen for break.
Yeah. So I might be telling you the same things over and over again, but basically how would I put this one? How many of you have, let's say, quite heavy change management process deployed throughout the company? So whenever you are doing something new, so you need to document it and get it approved, and then...
You still have to speak 25 minutes.
Okay.
More. And then you can get going.
Okay. So, if you do, what's your opinion? Are we basically able to eliminate those change windows? Because you can basically automate your service creation. If you think about deploying a new video surveillance camera and you need to configure something, if it's the legacy hop-by-hop configuration, then you need to create something into each of the nodes, and there might be some, let's say, once again, typos for that, and you might cause service interruptions. But if we are doing the dynamic service creation, would you then need change windows or change management approvals? Can we put this camera there? Or is it just easier that you can basically ship the camera out and somebody plugs it in and we can detect it and it can automatically configure the edge and core parts of the network? Comments?
still needed.
Yeah.
You can minimize the downtime, but there's always possibility that the new addition screws up something.
Yes, yes, of course. So I'm not entirely sure can we actually eliminate those, but at least we can. I would say that it shouldn't be. You could break it down in different levels. So if we are doing this and automatic service provisioning, we just need to know when they are plugging in things, and we need to check that everything's okay. But yeah.
So if I take the camera out of the one node and stick it into other nodes that's connected to this fabric thing, so it automatically works.
Okay.
I take away the camera from one node, stick it into another node, so it should work
Yes,
like this.
Yes. Yeah, we have basically the access cameras do have the fabric touch functionality built into those cameras, so they will work even without the network access control, basically. So they can signal back to the switches.
So the camera has to support the fabric?
Not really. We can utilize, let's say, in my demo part, I'm just using Raspberry Pis as clients in the network, and they will be auto-provisioned as well. So it really doesn't matter what kind of device you have in there, but just an example, the access cameras do have the fabric attached, so basically you can automate and you can actually configure from the web UI of the camera itself what is basically the service identifier in the network. So it's possible to do it like that, or you can utilize the access control and authenticate those devices and provision the ports based on what kind of device it is and where it is connected and so on.
So what is the unique identifier of the device then? Still MAC address?
It can be a MAC address, or you can utilize, of course, depending on the devices, if it does support .1x, for example, if it's EP or TLS. Normally for the access points, we can utilize, I would say that Extreme, our wireless solution, it does support EP and TLS-based authentication for those, and of course many of those edge devices can support .1x, so on. But some, let's say printers, for example, then you have to rely on MAC-based authentication. But still, okay, how many of you have separate printer VLANs in the network, or are they in the same network as the, let's say, normal users are? Because there was, we had some discussions with some of the customers why it's actually a good thing that you would provision, let's say, own VLAN for printers, because nowadays, at least in Finland, many of the printers are actually leased, and they are talking home, they are calling home. They are talking about how much supplies I'm having in this printer and is there enough paper and everything like that. So basically you have a way out from your corporate network because of those leased printers. And that might be a security risk if I don't know how printer leasing companies know how much they know about security and how they are actually deployed the interconnecting between the different sites and gathering the information. Is there a way of them coming into your network through that? So basically, if somebody hacks the printer provider company, and is there a possibility that they can basically come into your network? Once again, I would use the role-based access control and of course, do access control lists in the printer ports as well. Disable SSH and stable web UIs from the printers from regular users. Basically, you could, if there is somebody from the organization who is actually checking out or doing some SNMP polls or checking the web UIs for supply levels, then you can actually enable that to the specific user role, that they can actually access the printers and their web UIs, for example. But regular users should not be able to connect those.
How does the net flow information come together here?
Basically, it's we are talking about currently. Unfortunately, I would say that we are talking about S-flow.
Okay, doesn't matter.
So it's sampled, and I would say that IPFix or the net flow, if we are utilizing our core flow 2 switches and the analytics part of things. Then
in a network device level, there you have every device sending there, but on this one, basically you have edges only, or
yes. But you mean about net flow as a net flow protocol, or
no,
how
just
the traffic is flowing?
Yes, just a snapshot of the header level of the network flow. Net flow is just one standard,
yeah.
S flow is another one.
Yeah.
But how do or where do you gather it?
Basically, I would gather it in the access level as well. So if you are running our summits, you can enable it. We call it application telemetry. So you can get application information from the edge devices. Of course, you can do, we have those flow collectors as well. So if you want, you can create, let's say, certain tap points in your network and mirror the traffic into the application flow collectors. And that way it will utilize and do full inspection of all the data. So I would say that in the Fabric environment it's a little bit harder, because if there is any changes, the flow of the or the path of the traffic might change, and you are not able to see everything. But it depends.
The real question is, as it is adaptive and automatic, how do you say, changing network. So I don't care about the hops, I care about the edges.
Yeah.
So if I add another switch, so the next switch is not the edge anymore, so that stops sending the flow information, and the next edge starts sending it automatically, or you have to configure manually.
Of course, you have to configure it manually in a way. So it's not if you enable a device or add an edge switch and add some devices, it is not automatically sending any flow data out for inspection, for example. So that part is okay. You can configure it through the management, but still it's basically a different piece in a way. So in the Extreme Management Center, we have the element manager, and basically the part that you can actually configure and see everything on the network. Then we have Extreme Control, which is the access control engine. That's a separate virtual machine, but still everything is combined to that same web-based UI. And then we have the Extreme Analytics, which is the application analytics part of the things, and that is once again integrated into the single web-based UI. So for that, I would say that you need to enable, there is a configuration tool on the management, so you can enable the application telemetry. But if you want to check the information, you can enable it by adding the uplink ports for that, so it will check whatever is going through the uplink, or if you want to enable all of the ports.
So there's no way to automate it?
I would say there is, but it's not entirely, let's say, integrated, at least currently here. So we can do universal port profiles, for example. So each and every time we know that, okay, the port came up, we can check the information, what kind of device it is. Do we want to enable the S-Flow for this, for example? And you can trigger a script inside the switch itself and enable the S-Flow or basis or how we want to configure it. But it's not entirely integrated part in this concept. So normally you would do the analytics part and the flow collection, I would say in more legacy way of doing those mirror ports at some centralized place where you can actually see most of the traffic. That would be the, I would say, most beneficial way of doing. Of course, the edge and application telemetry on the summits is quite capable as well, and you don't need to add any additional hardware because you have those edge switches which can deploy the information for you.
Well, basically, if you are putting the application telemetry up and running on every switch, then you can see hop by hop what applications, what are the delays, how everything goes. Or
we cannot today. It's not possible to see. Okay, if we take consideration of this, so if we have our clients here and the server here, and this is taking or talking with this one, so we cannot pinpoint it in a way. So this specific link here is the problem. Today it's not available, but it's still planned in our roadmap. So we are talking about flow path analysis and basically utilizing the application telemetry functionality. It should be possible to do it, but it's still software development that we need to do on the management. So what we can do basically is on the maps, we can right-click on the link and check what kind of applications we are running on this specific link and what are the performance metrics is on that specific link or per device or overall by the network. So,
coming back to your camera example, are all the switches aware of all the cameras that are connected to the fabric all the time?
Basically, no, in a way, because we are doing MAC encapsulation, and so the core itself doesn't learn the MAC addresses of each and every device. Mm-hmm. And basically, where you need to know about the camera is at the edge, where it is actually connected.
But if I acquire one of the switches and make a run with it, what can I get out of it?
Configuration. So, of course, if you have done your security right, you cannot access the switch. So basically, you need to wipe it before you can actually get into the configuration part. So in that sense, you shouldn't be able to get anything out of it.
A screwdriver?
Maybe. I don't. To be honest, I don't know how or what kind of flash storage do we have inside the boxes. I haven't opened one, so I don't really know.
Okay.
Maybe the question was: is the one device information configuration on one edge switch?
Yes.
Or all the edges?
No, only in the single specific device where it is actually configured. And what I will show you later on today is the dynamic service creation. So whenever I'm plugging in a device, it will create the services, and if I unplug it, it will go away. So it's dynamic. Yes. What about your wide area networks and the fabric itself? So we could have different sites or different locations, and we could have some wide area network in between. It can be direct layer 2 connectivity, basically, if you think about the SPB over IP concepts, or it can be. So basically, how it works is if the easy part is the layer 2. So if you have just capacity and a couple of VLANs that you can utilize, we can basically rewrite our backbone VLAN IDs in the edge here. And on the other edge, we are getting, so basically in this pipe, if it's a layer 2 pipe, we are doing MAC-MAC encapsulation as well. And that can contain still those 16 million services. So we don't care about, once again, we don't care about the VLAN IDs which are actually running. We only do care about those two backbone VLAN IDs, and those can be rewritten at the edge. Do I have those? Nice. No, I didn't. So that's one way of doing things. If you are running this using dark fiber, of course we can enable, or if there is specific requirements fulfilled, we can utilize MACsec between, so we can encrypt the data, of course. And then last but not least, we have these small little boxes called open network adapters, ONAs, which are nice little boxes that you can actually create or use it as a fabric extender in a way, so it can be utilized between the different sites, and it can create an IPsec tunnel. It can create VXLAN overlays and so on. So there are ways of expanding the fabric connect between different sites, going up to the public one as well. So we are not thankfully limited to a single instance. Scaling metrics, nobody has asked this before. I mean, you guys didn't ask about scaling, but how many devices we can actually deploy in a single fabric? That depends a little bit on the hardware. So the smallest boxes are the Virtual Services Platform 4000 series, and it's around 760 nodes or something like that, which you can deploy in a single fabric, and the more powerful ones you can actually add a little bit more. So it's quite scalable in that sense. So if you think about 700 switches, that's...
What is the reason for the limitation?
Good question as well. Maybe it is something to do with the control plane and possible scalability issues on that end. I don't know. But still, if we consider, okay, how many, Lauri might know or remember, how many switches do we have in this? We have one of the biggest customers running this fabric is in Norway. How many switches there
Was it like 150,000 ports? So it was several thousand switches. I don't remember how many.
Yeah, but still they have let's say separate instances in a way, so you can utilize, let's say, layer 3 connectivity between and connect the different fabrics, and still these are their own islands, so you can utilize the same service identifiers here and here if they are not basically the same fabric. So in that way you can scale really high number of switches utilizing that. So basically this is our, it's a public reference, so it's a hospital in Oslo, Norway, so all those healthcare services are running on top of the fabric stuff.
I think they had 350 different sites across the region, so it's not just hospital, it covers more than half of the population of Norway. Quite good.
Yeah. So what other problems do we solve? So layer 3 virtualization. Okay, somebody has a need for this, and access control list by configurations can become quite complex. Of course, course, if you are utilizing our Live management and summits, you can deploy the access control lists and the policy from our policy manager, so you don't have to go to the switch once again and configure it. Everything is done from a single place, but still the network-wide virtualization which we do provide is really simple to deploy, and we can say that it's much more simpler than anybody else in the market today. You don't need to replace your existing access switches, so it can be HP, Cisco, Extreme, Summits, it can be whatever basically you want. Of course, if you think about the service automation and creating different services and auto-provisioning HP or Cisco or Extreme, basically those are the best choices in that sense that Cisco and HP today we support those as well in our policy manager. And basically if you do the role-based access control, you can utilize the same policy console or policy capability. Is it our summits, is it HP switches or Cisco switches as well. So in that sense, they will work out, but still, once again, if we want to have this telemetry information and so on, so added value comes, of course, from their side as well.
How many virtual networks can you have?
60 million.
How do you separate, differentiate?
There is this, I will jump back. So basically, this one, the IC number, this can be anything from 1 to 60 million something. So that is the one that is really creating the service itself, so the IC number.
That's per port or?
That's per service.
I mean, on a physical level, it's per port or multiple.
Basically, in a port, you can think of this VLAN number 20 as an access port, so that's just untapped access port. It's not, the IC is not relevant to the port itself. It's basically, if you think about, do you understand the concept of MPLS or layer 2 VPNs in MPLS networks, how they work?
A little bit.
So this is entirely the same thing. So if you create the MPLS L2 VPN, you have your service identifier in that sense. What was the actual? Lonka, do you remember? I don't get it out of my head now, but what was the L2 VPN service identifier in Summits, for example?
To be honest, I have no idea.
Okay. But anyway, so the concept is really much the same. So you have to bind the service identifier. That makes this idea really scalable, because if you think about the IC number 100 and the VLAN 20 here, VLAN 20 here, we can create IC number 200 and utilize the same VLAN 20 here and here as well. So it doesn't matter, it doesn't collide. So it's only taking account this IC number.
And per port you can have multiple or only one?
Basically, okay, then I have to introduce the network-to-network or user-to-network interfaces. So if you think about the nodes here, all of these ports which are utilizing the IS underlying routing protocol, they are called network-to-network interfaces. So in those cases, in these ports we are running the MAC-MAC encapsulation and we are utilizing the ICs only. We are not talking about direct layer 2 VLANs between these. So it will run in the MAC-MAC encapsulation. And basically this could be user-to-network interface, and in here we are talking regular VLANs, Q tags. So the ISID is basically stripped off in that layer. So in user-to-network interfaces, there is only regular VLANs. That's why we do support third-party devices. You don't have to change.
Just a little example. You have an IP phone and you have a computer attached to the phone.
Yes.
So to the phone I have two VLANs. One is phone and one is computer. So if I put it there, that's purely on VLAN based, or
yes.
iSide also.
This is basically purely VLAN based in that sense. On the access layer, it's purely VLAN based. So you have to have VLAN 20 and VLAN 100 for the. So 20 is your data VLAN and 100 is your voice VLAN, for example. They have to be configured in the port. You can do it dynamically, of course, and then we are utilizing MAC-based VLANs.
And if you have on the same switch, you have multiple phones, how do you separate these so they can talk to each other?
You can do policy, which is
actually using the iSides or
basically the policy is always attached to your access port. So basically it's MAC-based access control list in a way. So if a single port, let's say in your example, let's use the first example. So you have your data VLAN 100, which is for the PC, and voice VLAN is 20 for the VoIP phone. Both of those will be authenticated by the switch. And we are utilizing MAC-based VLANs. So basically there is two untapped VLANs on a single port towards the client. So one is going to the phone, and through the phone, the other one is going to the PC.
I think in normal cases, the data VLAN is untagged and the voice VLAN is tagged.
You can do it like that
from
as well.
the switching perspective, so it's just tagged port and the data VLAN is just untagged.
My question is just how do you separate the
Yes, we are coming to that. So basically, two options: policy and VLAN containment in a way, and forcing everything to your routing point. So basically, it's
policy in the sense of on a device perspective or port perspective.
Port and device. So if you think about role-based access control, and you will create a role called VoIP or phone, you can do different kind of access controls where it can actually talk. Can it talk only to the gateway, or can it talk each and every IP address on the same subnet? So you can basically block it in that way, or you can utilize private VLANs, which is basically the mechanism of separating.
But in the case that if you want to just separate those phones in the same switch, why not just use several ISIs and that's it?
You can, but it's quite painful if you have thousands of phones and creating, let's say, multiple roles. Because if you do the authentication part, you need to have the IC VLAN mapping assigned to the role as well. So it's still you need to create multiple roles. But I would personally, I would do the access control list.
What is the purpose for isolate those phones, not to talk each other?
Just minimize the risk of crappy firmware on a phone.
Okay.
Yeah, let's have a break. So
Okay.
there should be some coffees. Olisi jo, mutta sitten tavallaan sitä täytyy niin tehdä what other problems does the fabric solve is basically difficult topologies. So I've been saying this many times already today, but it can support whatever kind of topology. So there has been, do we have the pens or the whiteboard? It'd be nice to have one.
Do some draw.
Yeah. But basically, if you think about different kind of topologies, and this is quite poorly showing up here, but for example, if you are starting to see lots of traffic from this particular switch into, let's say, here, and everything is going through from a centralized place, if there is even remotely possible, or you have your fibers going through some other routes, you can actually create a new link directly from this switch to this switch, and it will start to run the traffic from the shortest path from point A to point B. So you don't have to configure basically anything if your IS is configured properly on specific ports. This just enable, just enable the link between, and it will automatically form the adjacency between those two nodes, and all the services are synchronized and traffic will start to flow. So there is no complex setup. Any kind of Ethernet service can be provided, and it's really fast in failover terms. Do you ever face issues like this, so you need to do something, or you are actually unable to create something that you would like to have because of let's say, the way that spanning tree or heaps works, for example? It's limiting what you would like to do and what you actually can do. Is there ever a problem, or has been, or what's your opinion? Still no comments.
No.
Yeah. But anyway, so as mentioned, you can directly connect anything to anything, so you can run multiple different links between different places, and there will never be a loop. What about service ability in the fabric? So if you need, let's say you have some kind of railing topology here, and you need to replace one of the switches, you have to, for example, you have your VSP 4000 series in there, and you want to add a 7200 series box in its place. How do you actually steer the traffic, or how do you signal to the network that, okay, this specific node is going under maintenance, or we can get rid of it? So basically we are configuring an overload bit, which is actually telling the rest of the fabric that do not forward traffic through this specific box. So you can actually configure or add or move this link to a different switch, and everything continues to work if that's something that you want to do, or you can configure the overload bit. So it will tell the fabric that this device is under maintenance, for example. Multicast deployments. How many of you run PIN in your networks? None of you? Okay. Some, let's say, surveillance camera deployments are utilizing multicast. And normally, at least in the centralized places where you are actually watching, or you have your, let's say, big screens and you have all the feeds coming in, that's multicast. Most likely, of course, you can utilize unicast deployment as well, but multicast is a little bit more efficient in a way if you want to feed the information to multiple different locations. So we do not use PIM in the fabric when you are running multicast. I don't remember the command from top of my head, but I would say it's enable fabric multicast, and that's it. You don't have to do anything else. So once again, we can tie the multicast groups basically into different ICs, or we can create just regular IC services and run the multicast in there. So you don't need to configure anything, and it's really much faster than if you would run PIM and OSPF, for example, or PIM in general, depending, of course, how many groups, multicast groups you're running in your network, and so on. So it's much more easier. So if some of you have ever deployed PIM and some routing protocol in your network and how to configure it and what are the actual recovery times when something happens, and all the rendezvous points, where is actually the best place for the RP and so on. That's a little, I would say, quite substantial amount of work that you need to do and research how the traffics are flowing and so on. So in a fabric environment, it's a single command that will enable the multicast capability, and you don't need to run PIM in it. So if you are running large surveillance networks, IPTV deployments on some, I don't know, hotel environments, they could utilize multicast services in their into the TVs in rooms and so on. And of course, we are able to integrate into the PIM networks as well. So if you have something else out of the fabric core, you can configure the PIM and be able to integrate with third-party networks as well. Okay, change-sensitive environments, so core data center kind of things. So no configuration change. Change is needed in the core bridges, and of course, as mentioned, the reduction of human errors, and frees up the team from many different tasks related to the change management, bureaucracy, and stuff like that. So basically, the point here is if you utilize this in your data centers, we can actually quite nicely automate the edge. We can have the same kind of visibility in your data center if we compare it to regular enterprise devices or laptops and so on. So we can see the operating system, we can see the roles and access control lists which are deployed to the virtual machines and so on as well. And of course, the same control, obviously, that we have on regular enterprise devices as well. I mentioned the term stealth/invisible network before. So basically, the fabric networks tunnel all the user traffic, so there is no basically a way of getting information out of the topology itself, because there is no hops in the network. So they are point-to-point or point-to-multipoint services. So topology cannot be discovered, complete traffic separation, and as mentioned, this the concept and idea behind this is the way that it works and the way that services work is quite similar to MPLS. So only the edge needs to be provisioned, but it's still substantially more simpler, because there is not that many moving parts. So government networks, public-facing networks, PCI requirements, HIPAA for healthcare, for example, if you have certain ways of doing things. So just create the services in entirely new way. What about IoT? Is that something that is interesting for you guys today, or have you been in your organizations? What is your, let's say, IoT strategy in coming years? Any plans or any ideas, or have you deployed something today? We still have some gifts for the questions, so please don't be shy. Anyway, so you can think about it and comment later. How I see it, the IoT is one of the biggest and hottest topics currently. So everybody is talking about it and everybody is buzzing about it. I'm not sure. Once again, I would like to have some feedback from you guys. Do you see IoT as same kind of buzzword or topic that software-defined networks was, let's say, a couple of years ago? So everybody was talking about it, but never went into the direction of open flow and controllers and stuff like that. So basically, I would define the automated campus as a software-defined network. So basically, everything is configured by the software, everything is talking with each other and automated. So in that sense, that would be something like software-defined networking. But on the IoT, at least on the United States and on the bigger countries, they are really doing something, and there are lots of concepts like smart cities, which incorporate lighting, automation, waste management, and different kind of things which are built upon the IoT. But as Forest Scout has created a survey or questionnaire about the IoT for customers. So this is really, in my opinion, quite alarming result. If you think about, I'm not sure, I remember there is this link in below, and you can basically check it from the material which should be online or available. So you can read the whole survey, but if you think about 30% are really confident what things are in their network. So basically, first rule of thumb was the visibility. So you need to know what kind of devices are in the network. How many of you can basically say that I know for a fact that there is no IoT devices in my network? Or do you know what things are in the network in reality? You have absolutely sure that you know each and every device that they are either corporate provided or they are under some MDM solution, mobile device management solution, which you know that, okay, these devices are the only devices that can actually access the network and use the resources on the network. How many of you can be pretty sure? So I would say that first enable the, let's say, access control, so you will start seeing different things that are actually connected into your network. Okay, so some organizations thought that they don't have any IoT devices in their network, and actually they had 8 different, let's say, IoT device types connected to their network. Only 44% of the respondents had any kind of known security policy for IoT. Do you have overall any kind of security policy inside your organization? What devices are permitted? What kind of antivirus software do you need to have? What kind of patch level do you need to have in the operating system? And so on. Or can anybody just plug in anything into the network and be happy with it? I don't know. So basically, this is one key point as well. So you need to have a set of rules, what kind of devices are actually allowed to be in the network. Of course, if you are running our network access control solution, for example, you can utilize the assessment engine or the assessment client in your devices. So basically, we can even get further information about the patch levels. Do we have some applications installed in our devices which are not allowed, basically, for to be used in our network? Some organizations might not like Dropbox, for example, so data can leak to the cloud. So when they are taking the laptop home, they can easily upload all the stuff into the cloud and be happy with it, and you don't have a clue. So basically, if there is some software, pieces of software that are installed in the laptops, we can utilize the assessment agent and notify and restrict the access to the network if there is some let's say, issues with the end device itself. And last but not least, so majority of the respondent think it's important to discover and classify devices without using any agent, because of course, if we are talking about IoT devices, there is no possibility to install an agent into a temperature sensor or motion detection sensor or whatever it is basically. So we need to be able to see those without any agent. And of course, the network access control in general is the tool that you can gain the visibility into the devices and control what resources they are actually accessing. One more thing is the search or O&A. So I mentioned it briefly on the fabric extent contexts. So basically, we can utilize it to secure IoT devices as well. So the main purpose actually of these devices, in my opinion, is that. So basically we have an IoT controller. It's a piece of software. And we can tie this open network adapter box into that specific end device basically. So we can create a pair. And we can basically, from here, from the IoT controller, you can configure and deploy the services that is required for this specific device. And what else it's doing, it's basically, it's creating those isolated traffic zones. It will protect the devices, and it will, the protection part is also tied to the controller part here. So basically we can do traffic analysis, what is actually coming from that end device. And if we detect any anomalies on the traffic patterns, for example, we can automatically quarantine it and do something about the traffic or the device itself. It was not a long time ago when we read from the newspapers that the WannaCry infected hospital environments and different kind of devices, because there is really old Windows XP embedded operating system running on these kinds of devices. So they were spreading like hell internally, because there was no way or no isolation how it actually did things. If you know how WannaCry actually spread, we could easily deploy a policy on the exports to stop it spreading. It was using the SMB as a mechanism to get itself into different places. So in a way, with the policy manager from a single web page, you could create these rules and add them to the roles and deploy it into the entire network, so you can immediately stop that kind of infections to spread. But anyway, so with this, you could detect the anomalies and you can automatically quarantine this and cut it off, so it cannot do any harm to your infrastructure in that way and infect other devices. So per device or per device type, you can create your own isolated services. Of course, you will get automation in a way, so when you create the pair and plug it in the network, you can create those services. You can get the inventory of what kind of devices are there and so on. So full inventory without having the actual agent installed in the devices. Runs on any kind of network. We can do IPsec encryption as well. So this is quite small box, PoE powered. It's a Linux-based box. Open vSwitch is supported. OpenFlow, NetConf, VXLAN tunneling, user secure boot, and so on. So nothing fancy about that in general. So supports our fabric attach mechanism and of course the third-party support via different overlay technologies. Do you see any use for these kinds of devices? Use cases? Our lovely regional director calls these VXLAN injectors. So we have these PoE injectors and we have VXLAN injectors. So basically you could utilize this in different kind of scenarios.
Do you have these in dual-factor authentication?
Two-factor authentication?
I mean, if let's say I configure it, then send it to, let's say, London, and someone, as long as you don't have a separate key or something you can attach to the device, it's useless.
Don't basically know, but the pairing in a way is done in the controller part of the software. So basically you have certain serial number or MAC address or something that you will tie those things two together. But there, as far as I know, there is not even in the roadmap anything like that. So. Yeah, some deployment options. So Fabric Connect based network. So of course the one that we prefer, or traditional IP networking. So any vendor is supported in those, or then the option tree. So IPsec overlay deployment. So I would say more or less that was the theory part or marketing part. I don't know, any comments so far about the IoT stuff or the Fabric stuff in general?
How is the Fabric connected to NSA?
There is no connection between NSA. So a little bit about the building blocks. So we have our wireless portfolio, we have our XOS devices which are running the Fabric attach, so automated configuration from the edge. We have a search for Fabric Extend and IoT, and then we have the actual Fabric Connect devices, which are the VSP series. So we have the smallest one, as mentioned, the 4000 series, with one gig copper fiber boards and 10 gig uplink ports. The VSP 7200, 10 gig versions. The VSP 8000 series, which is let's say semi-modular in a way, so we have this smaller slots, so you can actually add 4 different line cards into it. So if you have different needs and speeds for that, those boxes do support up to 100 gigs in the line cards. Then the chassis-based solution 8600, which is entirely new. So it was, I don't remember when it was actually announced. I would say, yeah. So that is entirely new chassis-based solution for the fabrics. That will support, of course, again, up to 100 gigs today on the port speeds. MaxTech is supported up to 100 gig as well, and so on. So the building blocks are basically here. So the VSP is your core technology, and if you need to extend it in certain limits, then you could utilize those, and of course you want to run exhaust and extreme wireless on the edge.
What's the speed of the extend thinglets?
1 gig.
And the throughput?
I haven't tested, let's say, in different scenarios. So maybe if you think about IPsec tunneling, it might not be 1 gig. But if you're running basic layer 2 services from it, then it's not taxing the CPU. But to be honest, I haven't tested the throughput metrics on those. Demo. I will go to my So here is basically our fabric topology, which is actually still showing.
Try to look at more lines.
Yeah. So, okay, it's still not readable in a way, but basically we have this BSP 4000 series switches in here. So this is our west, this is our core, and south and north VSPs. And then we have our edge devices as well. So those are Summit for 4G2s, which are running there. And if we go, let's open up this one. And we do show the don't worry about the beta software, because I was testing out some new features on this, so unfortunately still running the beta version. I need to run the official version. But basically, as you can see here, we only do have our default VLAN, our management VLAN, and single user-created VLAN with tag 3999 and the IP address on it. So there is nothing else basically configured on the services side. So overall, if I do show configuration, we can see some of service configurations. We do have the networking enabled, so we do the authentication for the edge parts. We have the radius configured, and everything basically what you see here is configured through the management, so you don't have to type this part by yourself. So there is nothing much there besides, okay, SNMP version 3 configuration, the networking and the radius configuration, and the basic management VLAN which is configured. All of this configuration can be put into the switch utilizing the Zero Touch Provisioning Plus. So there is no need to basically manually touch the switch at all. So it will automatically configure the software version to your preferred reference image, and then create your VLANs, create your networking configurations, radius configurations, policies, and everything. So, show forwards information, and as you can see that there is only the uplink port is now up. Where did I put my phone? I think it's actually in my check. Check that, and I will have to do some power controlling, and I will fire up those end devices which are connected to the edge switches. So, yes, now they should be powered up. So I should be quite soon be able to see. Okay, now we have port 8 is active already, and things are booting up. Let's wait a bit.
What do you mean booting up? What do you mean booting up?
As mentioned, I have the, let's say, client devices. Those are the Raspberry Pis. So it's connected to the port number 8.
Oh, the Raspberry is doing it.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I just
remotely just putting the power on.
Yes. I was just putting the power on because I wanted to you guys to show or see this dynamic service creation. So basically, as you saw, we didn't have any other than the management VLAN. And once those devices have booted up, I should be able to see it here. Okay, I can see the west edge Raspberry Pi and the south edge Raspberry Pi. They are both booted up and they have the IP addresses there as well. So now if I do show VLAN, as you can see, we have VLAN number 12 appeared in the switch. And basically, I will show it from the core side of things. I'll show VLAN fabric attached assignments. So there we can actually see the VLAN number 12 and the VLAN name. Type is dynamic, and we can see the ISID mapping. So it will automatically create those. And what I have basically done is I have on the access control engine, I have certain rules, a role which is tied to the VLAN number 12. And then I have an option to configure the IC value for this specific VLAN. And that is basically when we are doing the authentication. I'm going to close this one. I will open this one. In these examples, we are utilizing basically only MAC-based authentication, so we are not running .1x on the Raspberry Pis, but we obviously could do that as well. So here you can see the authentication type is MAC. We have accepted that to the system, and there is this profile, RP demo profile, which has the information about the VLAN and the IC mappings. So basically, this is more or less the dynamic service creation utilizing the access control and the policy framework. As mentioned, the other device types like access IP surveillance cameras have the fabric attached in the camera software itself, so you can do the VLAN IC mapping directly from the camera as well. So you can plug it in, and it will automatically deploy all the services into your core network. So just to be sure that everything is working, I'm going to turn on and do that. This is the west edge, and I should be able to ping to this. So, in that sense, this one is working. And now, if I do shut down for this device, and we go back to our switch here, first edge, external, and do show ports ignition. Oh. This one, I'll just shut them down. Now it's in ready state, so it's not anymore connected, so the link is down. If we do show VLAN, okay, it's still there, but it can take a minute or so to disappear. But anyway, so dynamic creation, and when you disconnect the device, the services will disappear as well.
Can you show VLAN for the port? Is the VLAN still assigned to the port?
Show VLAN, choose VLAN. It's only tagged to the uplink port.
Okay.
So port number 1, which is our uplink. So it's not active in the access port. So it will be immediately removed from the access port itself once the link goes down. And it can be only attached back there if you authenticate the device successfully and it has the information that please put the VLAN number 12 into this, let's say, authenticate session or authenticate role.
Can you show the profile when you are binding this VLAN 12 and then the IC and so on? So how you have done that?
Yeah. So let's go into the So the policy, this is the key to the whole thing. So we have our roles, which you can actually create. You can create multiple different roles, and you can create different services as well, and add them basically to the roles. I don't have anything currently here, I should say. No, basically you can add and remove any kind of services and access control lists from the roles. So these can be, of course, on the regular switches, it's from layer 2 to layer 4. Which you can utilize on switches, and on the wireless side you can go up to layer 7. So you can directly control applications through the policies. So first thing is here, and if you think about how you can actually map these things together. So if we are talking about normal basic access control and dynamic VLAN association, you could actually do this. So contain the VLAN and select your VLAN which do you want to contain. in our fabric, as we need to assign the VLAN IC as well, it's still, because it's quite new in technology, so we needed to create it on the, let's say, access policy. So we are utilizing a custom field in here, so you need to add the VLAN IC information into a custom field currently. So in here we have this VLAN number as well, and we have this IC number here. And that's correct. I still have let's go to Southwich now. I don't know what is the actual, I need to check the timeouts from the configuration part. But basically, we go to our map and we go to our 4K here. You can see there is no VLAN 12 provisioned in the core. Because there is basically no active service up and running. So it's in a sense, it's wiped out from the whole infrastructure.
So basically, you are now putting the Raspberry up and running again. The VLAN 12 will be here.
You can see it on the fabric batch mappings, basically set the same way that we actually had it on the Exos device, on the Edge device. So remember the command, so we run fabric batch assignments, which are run on the Exos. You can see the mapping between the VLAN and the IC. So I basically have only two backbone VLANs which are utilized on the core network interfaces basically, and then I have two different VLANs here. Then if I actually open up this one, so this is our wireless controller. And I will close this, and okay, basically this access point here is not really showing up quite nicely because of the contrast. It's connected to the Nord DSP. So if I open this one, and we do show fabric attach. We can see here that, okay, this basically the access point is connected to port number 11 and it's wireless access point. The system ID, and it has been successfully authenticated, so we are using authentication mechanism with the access points as well. And if we do show fabric attach assignment, we can see the same VLAN IC mapping that is actually active from this interface. And from the wireless side of things, if we go and check our apologies, and we have this output comes here, and the time is fabric attached. This is quite poorly showing up here, But I have the VLAN ID and I have added the tag, and the IC mapping is done in here as well. So basically, what this is actually doing is whenever I create a VLAN service, which is the ultimate campus here, and I based on the role information or assigning a default topology, I would add the clients to drop into this VLAN, and of course, whenever you plug the AV into your network, that it will automatically provision the services in your core as well. So once again, you don't need to go and manually create anything in your core switches. Does this make sense to you? That you understand the concept behind this? So at least to some part. Because if you are interested in learning and knowing more about the Fabric Attach and Fabric Connect and this whole automated campus stuff, please talk to the Telegrupp guys and we can arrange a joint day for a workshop, so we can get the stuff there and we can wipe everything clean and we can deploy it from the beginning. So we could do the automatic fabric creation, or we can configure the basic stuff from ground up, and we can check how we can debug those using the layer 2 tools that we are actually utilizing here on the fabric core, and how you check which path are used and so on. I'm really open to coming over here and doing those workshops. In my opinion, this is at least in the different places that we have been talking about this, it's always kind of, does it really work? And I need to see it in real life. So when we are doing those workshops, then it's actually really the concept and how you change the mindset of those fabric-based networks, and how easy it is actually to just use it and deploy all the configuration. So if there is an interest, you don't have to say anything right away. Just keep it in mind that you can, of course, do something like this as well.
Let's say, just to see that remotely you can configure from startup and stop something, it's something nice, but if you build it up in the lab, you can really see that yes, this picture from some camera is lost, or endpoint that checks user multicast will move from one network part to another part, and the stream will configure follow the user, and you see how it's. And if you have enough time, you could try to configure the sparse node to make the same thing happen. Or we could just prepare it and see how much it will be much harder, and how many errors we can just easily create.
Yeah, I have the. It's always funny that when I'm keeping the workshop with the customers, and even though I have all the configuration steps showing up on the slides and configure these commands, these blocks, and what it does actually, so we go through everything, and even still we have some human errors, because some of the lines are missing and some configurations have been missing, so it's not perfect in a way, because you do tend to make errors and so on, but still, it's usually proven, in my opinion, if you don't need to do that much manual work. Q&A.
is the central part of this? And how do you
Central part.
do the high availability?
It's basically, of course, depending on different devices. If there is just one rack unit, VSP 4000s, then it's, of course, you have your redundant power supplies and everything. But if you think about the topology in a way, so if we have our fabric core here, we have multiple different nodes. This is connected there, and there might be a link. So, of course, you can utilize link aggregation towards your different nodes, or I need to check it out about, let's say, MLAG kind of topologies. Is that something that we could utilize today? Because I had some issues with that, unfortunately. So basically, two different nodes and one different end switch. So this could be a stack of two nodes or so on. But anyway, so in the fabric core, that's automatically high available in that sense. So if some link goes down, depending, of course, your topology, can we utilize a different path. So we have had those two backbone VLANs, which are carrying all the
What
traffic.
is the brain of this system?
In each box.
So everybody has the configuration.
Basically, it's the brain is the ISIS, so that is used to signal information between different parts of network.
So if I lose the uplink on one box, the box itself doesn't work anymore, or
how do we draw it in here? But basically, it's, of course, you have to think about the topology itself. So if it's like this, we have three boxes, and we have our PC here and our PC here, and of course, if you take that out, these two guys will not ping. But if you have link from here, then you have redundant path available.
the real question is, if I have this box here, I don't have these uplinks here, I attach it here, nothing happens.
Yeah. But it's the same thing with every device. If you don't have connect,
I mean the configuration that you get the VLAN stuff and everything. Because it's configured on attach after the attaching the or port goes up.
Yeah. Basically, if okay, in this scenario, we have the our issue management center, and we have our network access control or identity engine, and of course, this switch needs to be able to communicate to the NAC and authenticate the user if we are running that, or if this is basically a device that is supporting the fabric attach, then the configuration itself is in this end device, and it can actually configure the services. But of course, if you don't have the uplinks to move the data anywhere, it still doesn't help. Did I understand your question in the correct way, or?
So the control center itself, management, doesn't need to be reachable on every moment.
Depends on the end device. So if we are doing authentication, is it .1x authentication, or is it MAC-based authentication, or whatever based authentication it is, then this needs to be reachable. Of course, you can have multiple gateways configured, and the switches themselves have at least two radio services. So if the other one is unreachable, try the other one. But in my opinion, this doesn't make much sense. So if you don't have this link, so you will basically lose the connectivity. It doesn't make any sense too.
Yeah, that's exactly. But if you have like hundreds of switches and you lose the uplink between 50, then inside the 50 you still can talk with the servers and stuff.
Yes,
But
as long as they
if you attach a new computer, then nothing happens.
Yes. So as far as the links are all up, then everything is up and running, and so on. Okay, maybe in different scenarios, but this is just splitting hairs. But if you have re-authentication enabled, for example, and your re-authentication interval is quite low, then of course when it happens, it can re-authenticate and it can get rid of the services and kick you out. But still, as mentioned, because of the fabric itself, you can create any kind of topology. So if you can create full mesh or whatever partial mesh or rings or whatnots, then please utilize that as so for the redundant parts. Other questions, comments? Interest in a workshop?
It's a very powerful demo. One workshop deal came in.
Yeah. Yeah, we actually closed the deal. It was actually the fastest sales cycles that I've experienced with Extreme. So it was a Friday evening that we went to the customer and I presented the fabric stuff to the customer, and they really liked the idea, and they were a little bit worried about, okay, is this really working like I advertised? And on the next Monday, I went to the customer and we did the workshop, and now we have the order in, so they bought new 7200 series 10 gig PSPs and a bunch of summits, and they are building the fabric core and automated network.
Yeah, and I have said that it's a great example of the scalability of this solution, because when you talk about fabrics, you usually consider hundreds or thousands of switches. They have now 25 switches, and they still wanted to have fabric. So.
Yeah. So it's not, let's say you can start from small environments, you can expand it really easily, no problems there. If you don't have any questions, comments, or of course you can talk with us during the evening as well. So basically this was all the material that I had for this today. Oh, actually, one more thing, or one more question. How many of you are doing private clouds or private data centers in your? Are you considering doing anything on public clouds, like AWS or Google Compute or things like that? So is it completely out of the scope? Okay. Thank you for your time and patience. As far as I see, everybody stayed away. At least to some degree. So talk with us if you have questions about these or any other something that could be in your mind. So wireless, LANs, data centers, routers, whatever comes to mind. Here still, so.
So, Timo, nothing more to say. Done all the speech.
Yes.
For lõuna ette kandnud, siis teeme lõunasöögi ja siis ma arvan, et järgneb päeva põhiline osa, kus me saame üksteisega mõõtu võtta. Õnneks siin aga häälestada seadist ei ole midagi vaja. Kõik on veel häälestatud, nii nagu häällikus. Üks käsk, start ja ongi tehtud. Loodan, et oli kasu, mis Timod rääkisid. Timod on meil siin, Mart ja mina, Kaupo on siin, et kellelgi midagi põletama jäi, saab alati küsida. Ja kui täna ei taha küsida, siis ilmselt saab seda hiljem teha. Ja mul on siin väike plaan, et me teeme tassime need seadmed kohale, millel see häbrikud teha saab. Ja siis paneks nagu konkreetid kokku ja siis vaataks, kas see ennast ära lõpuda. Ja kui lihtsalt on seda üles tagasi ehitada. Aga tänu siis kuulamast ja aga hetkel ei ole öeldud, aga ma arvan, et varsti tuleb.